You know, when you look at Indian politics today, there are definitely some figures who just really stand out. People whose every move, every word seems to spark a whole conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Shashi Tharoor, well, he's definitely one of them. I mean, four-time MP from Thiruvananthapuram, former big shot diplomat at the UN, author, quite the resume.
He really is fascinating. You got this person shaped by, decades working within the UN system, navigating all that global complexity, and then, boom, he jumps into the, well, let's say the very different world of Indian elections.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we wanted to dig into with you today. What makes him tick? Why is he such a compelling, maybe even controversial figure? Especially now when politics feels like it's, I don't know, changing.
Hmm.
We've been looking at quite a bit of stuff analysis of his career, his own words, trying to get a handle on his journey.
And you almost have to go back to the beginning to really get it right. Born in London, 1956, Malayali parents. Grew up moving around a bit, Mumbai, Kolkata. But then he just excelled academically.
That PhD from Tufts at 22.
Yeah, 22. Incredible.
It's hard to even picture that. Most people are still figuring things out then. Already, Dr. Tharoor.
And that clearly set him up for that long UN career. Nearly 30 years there.
Rising all the way up to Undersecretary General. And then, of course, that 2006 run for the top job, UN Secretary General. He almost made it.
That was a huge moment. Imagine if he'd actually gotten it. The fact he was a serious contender says a lot about his global standing.
Definitely.
But then, just a few years later, he makes this big pivot, steps away from global diplomacy to fight an election in Thiruvananthapuram.
Yeah.
2009, that was.
And not just once. He keeps winning 4 times now, right? Including that last one against Rajiv Chandrasekhar.
So consecutive wins.
It's such a striking contrast, isn't it? The halls of the UN versus, the ground reality of Kerala politics. Completely different worlds.
Completely.
Yeah.
And this is where that idea of post-politics might help us understand his style. The sense that he doesn't always stick strictly to party lines or rigid ideologies.
Okay, post-politics. Let's unpack that a bit. What does that actually look like with Tharoor? Can you give some examples?
Well, okay, think about February this year. He actually praised Prime Minister Modi's handling of international relations, specifically that meeting with the U.S. president.
Right, I remember that. Caused a bit of a stir.
It did. For a top Congress guy to publicly say something positive about a BJP prime minister on foreign policy, well, that's not typical. It's just he's willing to, see merit beyond the party divide, at least sometimes, maybe putting national interest first. That's one angle on post-politics.
It definitely goes against the grain of that constant adversarial stance we see so often. And it wasn't just that once, was it? What about economic policies?
Exactly. He's backed some more, let's say, market-friendly ideas, like the Adani Group managing the Thiruvananthapuram airport. That put him directly at odds with his own party in Kerala. And the left, too. And you also saw him saying positive things about the LDF government's startup initiatives in Kerala, again, praising the opposition government in his own state.
So he looks at the policy, maybe, more than who proposed it. People have called him a post-ideology politician. But how is that different from just, switching sides whenever it suits?
That's a really important question. See, unlike typical turncoats who jump parties for, say, personal gain or better electoral chances, Tharoor has stayed in the Congress. His post-ideology thing seems more about being open to different ideas, acknowledging good work wherever it comes from. It doesn't look like he's changing his core beliefs or party loyalty.
Okay.
But, this post-politics idea isn't without its critics. Some argue it can kind of paper over real power dynamics or make important ideological differences seem less important than they are.
Right. Okay, let's zoom in on Kerala then. You've got the UDF, led by Congress, and the LDF, led by the CPIM. It's a very specific political environment. Yeah. How does Tharoor fit in there, especially being such a fixture in Thiruvananthapuram?
Oh, he's absolutely central in Thiruvananthapuram now, since '09. And yeah, there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about him maybe eyeing the chief minister's job in 2026.
That definitely seemed to cause some ripples within the state Congress back in 2022.
That North Kerala tour he did?
Ah, yes. That tour. People read a lot into that, didn't they? Like it was an early campaign kickoff.
They did. And the way he talked about Nehruvian ideas,
Right.
secularism,
Huh.
some leaders in the state party saw it as him trying to build support beyond just his own constituency. Remember the Youth Congress pulling out of one of his events That showed some real nervousness there.
But interestingly, at the same time, didn't he get a pretty warm welcome from groups like the Indian Union Muslim League, a key UDF ally?
That's a great point. The IUML's reaction was quite positive. It really highlighted his ability, maybe, to connect across different groups within that broader UDF structure. It suggests his appeal isn't just limited to the usual UDF-LDF battles.
And not just allies, right? He shows up at events with BJP leaders too, like that Visinjam port opening in May 2025.
Yes. His UN experience, dealing with all those different players on a global scale, probably gives him a different perspective on engaging across party lines back home.
And didn't the Prime Minister make some comment about that appearance? Something about sleepless nights?
He did, jokingly. But it kind of underlines Tharoor's position, doesn't it? He operates in this space where the usual political walls seem a bit porous.
Yeah, permeable is a good word.
It shows he can keep channels open across the board, even if it makes his own party colleagues a bit uncomfortable sometimes.
Okay, let's talk about language, because, wow, that's maybe his most defining trait for many people. His English is just exceptional. And he uses it, doesn't he, as a tool?
Oh, absolutely. His vocabulary is legendary, obviously, but it's more than that. He uses it with real precision, often with a bit of wit, like when he brought up algo speak in 2022.
Right, that term really caught on. It perfectly described how people talk online to get around filters.
Exactly. It showed he's tuned in. And then there's the writing. A Sahitya Akademi Award for An Era of Darkness. More than 24 books.
Incredible output.
His literary side is totally part of his public image. When he recommended the Mahabharata to teenagers earlier this year, it wasn't just random. It ties into his deep engagement with Indian history and culture, which you also hear in his political talk, and his famous love for words like defenestration. It adds to that persona.
And he's huge on social media, too. Millions of followers. And he's not afraid to poke fun at himself, right? Like the memes about his super long New Year messages or calling himself impecunious.
Yeah, that self-deprecating humor makes him seem more approachable, maybe, despite the formidable intellect.
It's a key part of his brand, you could say. He can be incredibly articulate, almost professorial, but then connect very informally online.
It's quite a balancing act.
But look, a career like his, this visible, this unconventional, it's bound to have controversies.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
The IPL issue back in 2010 and the terrible tragedy of his wife Sunanda Pushkar's death in 2014. Those were intensely difficult times, obviously, and got huge media scrutiny. More recently, Operation Sindoor in May 2025. He led that all-party delegation focused on counterterrorism diplomacy. That also got mixed reactions.
Yeah, that was interesting. The government presented it as unity, but some in his own party were skeptical, weren't they? Made some slightly odd comparisons. And critics pointed fingers at what they saw as inconsistencies.
It really put him in that tricky spot, again, trying to contribute on national issues, but still dealing with party politics. And then there was his stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. Remember, he initially criticized India's neutrality, but later, by March 2025, he was actually praising the government's position.
That shift definitely got noticed, especially back in Kerala. It just shows how complicated it is to talk about global events when you're also navigating domestic politics.
But through all this, his base in Thiruvananthapuram seems incredibly solid. 4 wins in a row speaks for itself.
Totally. He even put out that booklet, didn't he, in 2024? Like 68 pages detailing everything he'd done as MP for 15 years. Highway bypass, Visinjam port, things people can see.
That kind of accounting probably goes down well locally. And reports suggest he's good at connecting with all sorts of different groups there, temple committees, tech workers, fishing communities. You need that broad touch in a constituency like Thiruvananthapuram.
It's definitely a different style from his 2024 opponent, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who some saw as maybe less hands-on. Tharoor seems to really cultivate that connection.
And another big piece of the puzzle is his clear admiration for Jawaharlal Nehru. He's a real champion of those Nehruvian ideals, secularism. He even wrote a major biography of Nehru.
Right, that book, and Pride, Prejudice, and Punditry, too. It shows a deep commitment to those ideas. But in today's India, defending Nehru isn't always the popular stance.
No, it definitely draws criticism in the current political climate, where history is being actively debated and reinterpreted. His defense of secularism puts him in a specific camp. Just like his strong critique of British colonialism in An Era of Darkness shows his engagement with history's impact today.
And his diplomatic skills are still clearly valued. We saw that with the anti-terrorism work, leading the delegation to the 9/11 memorial, speaking out after the Pahalgam attack. He can articulate India's position on the world stage.
He can. And it's interesting watching him balance that diplomatic language, with a tougher line on national security, hinting at self-defense, taking veiled shots at countries seen as backing terror. It's a complex stance.
So when you pull it all together, what is it about him? Why does he resonate, even with all the complexities and controversies?
I think it really is that mix, the global experience meeting local politics,
Yeah.
that independent streak, the ability to communicate so effectively. He's definitely not one-dimensional. And yeah, there have been controversies, but there's also this feeling of maybe authenticity. He's not just reading from a script.
And looking ahead, 2026 Kerala elections aren't that far off. His path seems a bit uncertain, doesn't it? He says he's committed to Congress, but also keeps his options open.
That statement he made recently kind of sums it up, right?
Right.
Ready to serve Congress if they want him, but aware he has other paths he could take. He's someone with a lot of skills, a lot of options.
So wrapping up our deep dive on Shashi Tharoor, it really makes you think, doesn't it, about how people navigate these messy political times, trying to connect global views with very local needs.
It really does. And leaves a question for you, the listener, to ponder. What does someone like Tharoor, with his unique path, tell us about where Indian politics might be heading? And what space is there for individual thinking within big party structures as the world keeps changing? Definitely something to chew on.